I am renowned in the palace as a venomous woman, capable of bestowing a red sash of execution on anyone who displeases me. The concubines I have slapped could circle the imperial city 3 times. Even the dogs in the palace avoid me. Later, the concubine who was most at odds with me in the palace, Xian Fei, died. Her daughter, Princess Fuan, became a hot potato. I watched them push and shove each other, thinking that this trouble would never fall on me. But on a snowy night, 8-year-old Princess Fuan knocked on my palace door. Welcome to my channel. If you like this story, please click to subscribe. There are more wonderful stories waiting for you to listen to. Chapter 1. Lady Wan. When Fuan arrived, I was roasting sweet potatoes in the courtyard. Suddenly, someone called me, and I was so startled that I quickly hid the sweet potatoes behind me. Fuan stood at the door, not daring to come in, and only called out to me in a stammering voice. Princess, what brings you here at this late hour? I walked over and looked down at her from above, my tone cold and distant. Fuan seemed startled by my tone, shivering slightly, but she gathered her courage and looked at me. She spoke slowly and clearly. Fuan wants to follow Lady Wan. Looking at the earnest little girl before me, I couldn't help but lean down and pinch her thin little face. My tone cruel and mocking. Didn't your mother tell you that I am her mortal enemy? After Xian Fei's death, Princess Fuan, who was under her care, became a hot potato. She was different from the other concubines who died of illness or were killed. Xian Fei's family had committed a crime, so she was officially sentenced to death by the emperor. Naturally, no one in the palace was willing to raise the daughter of a criminal woman. The empress asked all the concubines, big and small, but she didn't ask me. I was very sad and felt that the empress was isolating me. It was truly unfortunate for the palace. Cui Zhu, the personal maid standing nearby, couldn't help but roll her eyes at me. Your Highness, Princess Fuan would be truly unfortunate if she followed someone as unreliable as you. Well, after all, my feud with Xian Fei is out in the open. If her daughter were to fall into the hands of a poisonous woman like me, you can imagine what would happen. The Empress values her reputation above all else. If she really were to hand the little princess over to me, who knows what the palace would say about her being jealous and unable to tolerate a child. But now, Fuan has actually come to me on her own, asking me to raise her. Do I look like a kind-hearted person? Would I be so magnanimous as to raise my sworn enemy's child? I waved my hand, intending to order Cui Zhu to send the princess back. But suddenly, my sleeve was grabbed. The next moment, a small hand, slightly cool to the touch, gripped mine, then tightened as if resolved to something. I glanced over impatiently. I tried to make my expression look fiercer to scare away this ignorant little brat. After all, I had a reputation for being evil. Even the dogs in the palace would go out of their way to avoid me. But for some reason, Fuan still held on to me firmly. The look in her eyes was innocent and naive, but also a little stubborn. Lady Wan, my mother said that you are her best friend and that you won't abandon me. Let her go. Fortunately, Cui Zhu covered my mouth in time, preventing me from swearing in front of the child. I've been in a good mood these past few days, eating vegetarian food, reciting sutras, and cultivating my mind. Only Xie Shuran could so easily break my composure, even though she's been dead for several days. Just thinking about her makes my hair stand on end. What a disaster. She fought with me when she was alive. Even in death, she won't let me rest in peace. She even wants to leave this burden for me. What a delusion! Lady Wan, what is it? I snapped. Fuan pouted, looking as if she was about to cry. She was already cute, and now she looked even more pitiful. Your Highness, why are you so mean? The princess is just a child. Cui Zhu gave me a reproachful look, then quickly squatted down to hug Fuan and coax her in a low voice. Wan Yang. Fuan knows she's a trouble, so it's only natural that you're afraid. The little ball of milk sniffled as she spoke, secretly observing me with her beautiful big eyes. How ridiculous! I don't even care about the Empress. Why would I be afraid of a little child? Never mind. Come inside first. As I passed by the campfire where I was roasting sweet potatoes, I squatted down again. The bright yellow flames danced in my eyes, warm and sparkling. Fuan clung to me like a little animal, crouching beside me, until the aroma of roasted sweet potatoes wafted through the air, mingled with the wind and snow, and reached my nostrils. I sniffed the air and tilted my head to ask Fuan, "Want some roasted sweet potato?" Fuan munched on the roasted sweet potato, eating so enthusiastically that her hands and mouth were covered in it. This child was not at all like her pretentious mother. I remembered how Xie Shiran was so fussy, even cutting a small snack into pieces and eating it with a skewer. How could she raise her child to be so fierce? I had no intention of raising Fuan. She would be nothing but trouble, and I didn't want to get involved in any trouble for no reason. I decided to send her away first thing tomorrow morning. No, I'll just hand her over to the Empress. After all, that woman is the most hypocritical and insincere person around. I'll take Fuan to her palace gates and cry. That's it. That's what I'll do. But the next day, Fuan seemed to know what I was thinking and refused to leave the house. Lady Wan, are you abandoning Fuan? What did Fuan do wrong? I'll change. Please don't take me away. Lady Wan. The little girl cried until she was hoarse. Cui Zhu, standing nearby, chimed in. Lady. The little princess is so pitiful. Let's keep her. Last night when I was changing her clothes, I saw that the child is covered in injuries. This palace is full of people who flatter the powerful and trample the weak. Xian Fei has only been gone for a month, and the princess has already suffered so much coldness and abuse. Cui Zhu spoke, pretending to cry as well. I was so annoyed by the commotion of the two of them that I decided to deal with it later. Xie Shiran, you really won't let me live in peace even after death. To be honest, the Xianshu families have been sworn enemies for generations. To summarize, it all started when her grandmother and my grandmother both fell for the top scholar of the imperial examination at the same time. We've been at odds ever since she entered the palace. She thinks I'm arrogant and domineering, while I think she's hypocritical and pretentious. In short, we just can't stand each other. The imperial harem is a massive battlefield. A group of young ladies from distinguished families, raised in luxury, fight over a man. They try every means possible to snatch the few favors available from each other. Xie Shiran pretended to be sick and snatched the emperor away from me 8 times. I sprained my ankle in the imperial garden and she intercepted him 5 times. Compared to those overt and covert struggles, we were truly like water and fire. Everyone in the palace could see that Xie Shiran and I didn't get along. So when the news that Princess Fuan was in my palace spread, the entire harem was watching the spectacle. And the Empress was the first to lose her composure. When the Empress arrived, I was taking Fuan out to sunbathe at the courtyard gate. This child is too pale, she doesn't look healthy. Children should get more sun. As the Empress's arrival was announced, a woman dressed in a sapphire blue palace robe entered, supported by palace attendants. Behind her followed a group of concubines who had come to watch the spectacle. Each one was more elaborately dressed than the next. I rose lazily and bowed in greeting. The Empress's face remained composed and gentle. No need for such formalities. Imperial concubine. She turned her head, as if only now noticing Fuan, and exclaimed in surprise. Oh, Fuan, what are you doing here? Fuan obediently curtsied to the Empress. I'm here to pay my respects to the Empress. Fuan, come here quickly and let the Empress hold you. Watching her clumsy act, I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Empress, if you have something to say, just say it directly. There's no need to beat around the bush. Sister, how could you say that? I was just thinking that this is also a connection between Fuan and you. Why not just leave him under your name and raise him? This time, I couldn't stay calm. But the Empress didn't give me a chance to refuse. Turning directly to Fuan. Fuan, do you like the Empress? Fuan likes Waner. Then is it okay for Fuan to follow Consort Wan from now on? As expected of the Empress, she decided Fuan's fate in just a few words. And in front of all the other concubines. Now, even if something happened to Fuan in the future, she couldn't blame the Empress. After the Empress left, I rubbed my chin and looked at Fuan. I couldn't help but sound a little threatening. Child, if you wish to stay in my Zhaohua Palace, you must follow the rules of Zhaohua Palace. The first rule is to stay 10 meters away from me. After speaking, I lifted my skirt and ran away, as if there were wolves and tigers chasing me. Raising a child is easy, as long as they are fed 3 meals a day. They won't die. I spent a long time with Fuan, treating each other with respect. She was very well behaved and knew that I didn't like her. So she never took the initiative to appear in front of me. It was Cui Zhu who often looked at me inside. I've never seen a child as well behaved as Princess Fuan. She's so tiny. She melts your heart. How can you bear it, Your Highness? I casually spat out a grape skin and said indifferently, You little girl. Do you really think I'd worship Xie Shuren's child like a deity? I'm a poisonous woman. Giving her a single meal is already a great kindness. Cui Zhu couldn't help but mutter, Your Highness. You're always like this. Ruining your own reputation. Even the Emperor hasn't come to our palace in a long time. It's just as well. If he came, we'd have to serve that dog. Before she could finish, Cui Zhu covered my mouth with her hand. Your Highness, be careful what you say. There was no one else in the palace. Do you expect the birds in the sky to tell the Emperor that I cursed him? Cui Zhu has been with me for so many years. But she's becoming more and more like an old antique. When I have nothing to do, I like to stroll in the imperial garden with Cui Zhu. It's not that I like to admire the flowers and grass. It's mainly because I have a high rank. And everyone in the harem except the Empress has to bow to me when they see me. I've struggled for so many years to become a noble concubine. So of course I want to show off a little. It just so happens that the Empress doesn't like to go out. She was a sickly beauty in her maidenhood. And since becoming Empress, she's been sickly day in and day out. If her family weren't higher in the imperial family than mine, who knows who would have become Empress? In the end, it's all my father's fault for not being ambitious enough. I must write him a letter and give him a good scolding. With these thoughts in mind, I arrived at the small pavilion in the middle of the imperial garden. Just as I was thinking of taking a rest, I heard the noise of children. It must be the princes who had finished school and were playing in the imperial garden. I didn't want to spoil their fun, so I was about to leave. But as I turned around, I saw a scene that made my blood run cold. Fuan was lying on the ground with a fat boy sitting on him. The little fat boy was twice Fuan's size. Straddling him and shouting excitedly, Go! Go! Climb faster! Fuan's face and body were covered in dirt. The little bundle of flesh lay on the ground, lips pressed tightly together, saying nothing. Cui Zhu, standing nearby, was furious and clenched her fists, ready to charge forward. I stopped Cui Zhu and made a shushing gesture toward her. Though she didn't understand, she obediently stopped her charge. I stood there quietly and watched Fuan. If I wasn't mistaken, a wicked smile flashed across the little girl's face. The reason I stopped Cui Zhu from rushing over was because I wanted to see what Fuan would do next. She was usually a crybaby at my place, crying at the drop of a hat. But now she was being bullied like this and she wasn't crying. That was indeed unusual. Sure enough. The next second, I heard Fuan scream in pain as she fell heavily to the ground. The little fat boy on her back was also thrown down violently. Her chin hit a sharp stone, causing blood to gush out. It was a move that injured the enemy but also harmed oneself. The little fat boy let out a loud cry. The other princes and princesses who were watching the spectacle also gathered around. Seeing this, Fuan quickly got up and ran away. On his way out, he kicked the little fat boy hard on the butt. This kid really doesn't like to be wronged. But, if I remember correctly, the one who just bullied Fuan was the son of Consort Yu, who is also His Majesty's third prince. Yugoeren had a difficult childbirth and nearly died giving birth to this child, whom she had always cherished like the apple of her eye. The third prince had always been a domineering character in the palace. Now that he had been humiliated by Fuan, he wouldn't let it go easily. Cui Zhu, who had been worried about Fuan, must have also thought of this, and her face was filled with anxiety. I gently patted Cui Zhu's hand. Let's go, Cui Zhu. It's time to show the people of the harem that those from the Zhaohua Palace are not to be bullied by just anyone. Cui Zhu's face lit up with excitement upon hearing this. She looked ready to charge out and fight. This girl must have read too many palace intrigue novels. When Cui Zhu and I returned, Fuan had already cleaned herself up. She was sitting quietly at her desk, reviewing the lessons her teacher had left her. When she saw me come back, she looked away nervously. I beckoned her over. The little girl's eyes lit up. She ran to me, lifted her porcelain white face, and called out softly, "Lady Wan." Fuan, tell me, did anyone bully you at school? Changle blinked her eyes but shook her head gently. No one bullied Fuan. No sooner had she finished speaking than my palace door was pushed open violently. The person who came in was dressed in a pink embroidered long skirt with tiny pearls hanging from the hem, which made her look even more delicate. If one ignored her face, which was contorted with anger, she was actually quite a beauty. What a grand display. Consort Yu. Don't you know how to greet me? Consort Yu heard this and reluctantly bowed to me. Upon hearing this, Lady Yu reluctantly curtsied to me. She had been favored recently and had become increasingly arrogant and domineering, somewhat reminiscent of me in my prime. In this palace, rank did not mean everything. Whoever was favored had the capital to act superior. However, I had a fierce reputation, so Lady Yu did not dare to be too insolent in front of me. Empress Consort, this concubine has come today to seek justice. Yugoeren spoke, her eyes fixed on Fuan behind me with a fierce expression. I remained expressionless as I shielded Fuan's small body. Then I looked at Yugoeren with a playful expression. What justice does Lady Yu seek? Empress Dowager, I should not meddle in your palace affairs. Though Princess Fuan is not your biological daughter, she is still raised under your care. No matter what you do, you shouldn't ignore her like this. Should you? If it weren't for that good-for-nothing Hong Zhang coming back crying today, this concubine wouldn't have known that these little brats were bullying Fuan like this. At first, I wanted to raise Princess Fuan to be a companion for Hong Zhang, but she insisted on staying with you. So I gave up that idea. But now that you're acting this way, I can't help but look down on you. If you can't love them, it's better not to raise them at all. Fuan is still of noble birth, raised in luxury by Xian Fei. How could he end up here, treated like a rootless weed, at the mercy of others? As she spoke, Yugoeren suddenly shouted toward the door. You little brat. Get out here. No sooner had she finished speaking than a round head peeked out from the doorway. The little fat boy limped in, his round face looking pitiful. He looked so pitiful. Yugoeren was always a hot-tempered woman. Seeing the third prince dawdling, she slapped him on the head. What are you dawdling for? Hurry up and apologize to your sister. Have you forgotten all the manners and morality I taught you? I was completely speechless. This lady you wasn't here to pick a fight? The third prince stammered. Fifth sister. I'm sorry. Fuan peeked out from behind me. Her cute eyes slightly narrowed. And whispered, "It's okay." The noblewoman nodded in satisfaction. She then turned her gaze back to me. For some reason, I felt a pang of guilt. She stared at me for a long time before sighing. Since Sister Xie chose you, she must have her reasons. Don't let the Empress Dowager down. With that, she pulled the third prince away and turned to leave. I looked at her back and couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Xie Shiran and I entered the palace together. She was a kind-hearted person. A palace maid was caught stealing items from the palace and begged her on her knees. She lied and said that her parents were seriously ill and she had nowhere else to turn. It was a very poor lie. But Xie Shiran, that fool, believed her. She used her own money to help the little palace maid pay off her debt. But in the end, the little palace maid was bribed by the other concubines and turned on Xie Shiran, saying that she had instructed her to do it. I will always remember the look in her eyes at that moment. She was panicked and heartbroken, but there was not a hint of remorse. Later, I took care of that palace maid for her. I pulled out her tongue and bones, and blood stained the long steps of the palace gate. My reputation as a poisonous woman was thus cemented. That day, Xie Shiran came to find me and happened to see me with the knife in my hand. I stabbed the palace maid in the heart. Blood splattered on my face. I should have been panicked, having been caught by her in such a terrible scene. But as if possessed by a demon, I flashed her a provocative smile. Xie Shiran's clear eyes stared at me intently. She said, "Wen Jin, you don't have to do this." I always thought she was accusing me of being evil. It wasn't until much later that I realized what she meant. She wanted to say, "Wen Jin, you shouldn't ruin your reputation for me." Xie Shiran, I hate the way you think you understand me. Xie Shiran, I hate it when you act like you know me so well. Xie Shiran, I hate you. I hate you more than anything. I will raise your daughter to be just like me, a poisonous woman. I will make you regret ever meeting someone like me. The next day, when Fuan went to the palace to study, I personally picked her up after class. She blinked her big eyes in surprise and looked at me. Wan Yang. This time, I didn't dodge her, but instead took Fuan's small hand. "Fuan, who bullied you? I'll bully them back for you." 300 imperial guards surrounded the palace school, leaving no room to move. It's no wonder I'm so arrogant. After all, my older brother is the commander of the imperial guards. The old scholar in the palace school pointed at me and gasped for breath. I didn't care much and waved my hand. The teacher is old. Let's help him back to rest. Then I looked at the third prince in the corner and waved at him. Hong Zhang, be a good boy. Tell me, who were the people who bullied your fifth sister? The chubby third prince was quite obedient. His chubby little hand quickly pointed out a few people. I glanced at them casually and saw that they were all just kids. So I couldn't remember who belonged to whom. However, under the heavens, apart from the Empress Dowager, there was no one that Wen Jin dared not beat up. But dealing with children was no fun at all. Each child left with a turtle drawn on their face. A sign was hung around their necks. It read, "I am a bully." The turtle was drawn by Wang Ba with meticulous care. The words were personally inscribed by this palace. Later, I heard that night, all the concubines in the harem went to the empress's chambers. But for some reason, when they came out of the empress's chambers, they all silently avoided coming to my chambers. On the 8th day of this month, it was the emperor's usual day to choose a concubine. He has always been fair, never favoring any concubine. The concubines in the palace rarely have any complaints. After not seeing him for a few days, the emperor was still in the same mood. He had a cold expression on his face all day, looking as if someone had cheated on him. When he entered my courtyard and saw Fuan, he paused for a moment. It seemed like it took him a long time to remember that he had a daughter. "Is this Fuan?" Fuan obediently curtsied to him, then carefully took a step back and hid behind me. The emperor frowned and spoke unhappily. "Cowering like that? What a disgrace!" I gently patted Fuan's back to comfort her. The emperor is not a qualified father. He never asks about the prince's studies and doesn't even remember how many children he has. I remember the first time I met the emperor. He was an old-fashioned man, though not very old, always talking about rules and etiquette. He was clearly in his 30s, but he had the air of an old man. I quietly moved back a little. He didn't notice and just sat down next to me as usual. He drank another pot of tea. As soon as he took a sip, he frowned. "I remember giving you some fine Longjing tea the other day. I liked it very much and drank it all. Is there any left, Your Majesty?" I blinked at him. The emperor remained silent. The world finally fell quiet. After a long while, he suddenly lifted his head and spoke meaningfully. "Although Fuan is not your biological daughter, you should still take care of her and teach her some feminine virtues and proper etiquette. Otherwise, when she marries in the future, people will say that I didn't know how to raise my daughter." He spoke as if talking to himself, but I suddenly felt a chill in my heart. At that moment, Fuan didn't seem like his daughter, but a commodity waiting to be sold. I didn't plan to let Fuan continue her studies in the palace. The serious schools only produced fools like Xie Shuran or old fogies like the Empress. So I decided to teach Fuan myself. When I made this decision, Cui Zhu looked at me with a strange expression, as if she were looking at something unreliable. But Fuan was very happy. Sure enough, no child likes to go to a proper school. I devised a very strict study plan for Fuan, but what she learned were all improper things. "Fuan, I ask you, what should you do if a handsome man tries to seduce you? Castrate him first, then kill him. Very good. What if a green tea girl frames you? What would you do then? Slap her 10 times and pin the crime on her." I nodded with satisfaction. The little girl did have a talent for being a poisonous woman. After this incident, Consort Yu became much closer to me. But it was mostly one-sided. This girl, who I hadn't noticed before, was actually shameless. I had made it clear multiple times that I preferred quiet. Yet she kept coming to find me. She would bring the third prince along and sit there all day. Once, she watched me teach Fuan something, and her expression finally changed. "What you're teaching Fuan isn't something a princess should learn." This remark piqued my curiosity. What should a princess learn? What shouldn't she learn? Yugoeren was stumped by my question and couldn't answer for a while. After thinking for a long time, she finally said solemnly, "Are you sure you want to learn these things? Is it really for Fuan's own good?" I looked out at the courtyard, where Fuan, with her tiny frame, held a long sword and formed a sword flower with her pale hands. I had been teaching her martial arts and swordplay for the past few days. What the princes could learn, my Fuan could learn too. What the princes couldn't learn, my Fuan could learn too. The evening sun shone through the layers of palace walls and fell on her. It was as if the sun had just risen. Look. Look at what? The noble lady turned her head in confusion and saw the third prince chasing a butterfly and falling flat on his face. The little fat boy didn't cry, but got up from the ground happily and continued chasing. They are so lively. Unlike us. We've been trapped in this shell of so-called rules and regulations for too long. I almost forgot. Forgotten what? Yugoeren blinked and asked me. I turned my head to look at her and smiled, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Forgotten that you are a poisonous woman. You Guerin. Actually, what I wanted to say was, the sunset in this world always faces the sunrise. When Fuan was 13, the Turks invaded. The emperor decided to send a princess to marry a Turkic prince to end the war. Throughout history, rulers have always used their daughters' marriages as political bargaining chips. There were 2 princesses of marriageable age in the palace. One was Princess Fukong, the daughter of the empress. The other was Princess Fuyo, the daughter of Lady Xia. The empress had been busy eating vegetarian food and praying to Buddha for years, paying little attention to palace affairs. In truth, since Xie Shiren's death, the palace had lost its meaning. The former rivalries were nothing more than a form of entertainment. By the end, those obsessed with love had all perished. Later, the entire harem was left with only Xie Shiren, a fool who genuinely loved the emperor. She seemed to love everyone equally. No one wanted to compete with a do-gooder. So they simply stopped. Everyone thought that they could live peacefully like this. But the emperor couldn't tolerate the Xie family. Nor could he tolerate that fool Xie Shiren. In fact, the plot to frame the Xie family was flawless. But the Xie family had 100 years of good reputation. How could a family that raised a fool like Xie Shiren do something like treason? Anyone with eyes could see that this was a complete frame-up. But no one dared to say anything. From that day on, I hated the emperor. I also hated the high-sounding principles he spoke of. He said, "I am the emperor. I am the emperor. If sacrificing a princess can bring a century of peace between 2 nations, I am willing to give up my beloved daughter." Everyone praised the emperor for his kindness and for setting an example for the world. But his good reputation came at the cost of a woman's happiness and freedom. Perhaps in his eyes, the value of a woman versus a nation was clear as day. But I couldn't agree. The emperor cared too much about his reputation. So he willingly sacrificed his own daughter to preserve his name. The empress lost her dignity for the first time. She collapsed at the emperor's feet, begging him to revoke his decision. But a king's word is as good as gold. Even if it meant sacrificing the trust of his wife and the life of his own daughter. On the day of Fukong's wedding, there were red decorations for miles around, and the sound of banging and clattering filled the air. But no one could smile. I heard that the Huns were cannibals and extremely cruel. The noble lady Yu sighed. Fukong is only 17. How can the emperor bear to do this to such a young child? I gently hugged Fukong, who was standing beside me, my face expressionless. But inside, I couldn't help but feel a wave of sadness. Even a fox mourns the death of a rabbit. How much more so when the sacrifice is a fox? The empress looked as if she had aged 10 years. She seemed to have had all her vitality sucked out of her in an instant. Watching Fukong's procession, she laughed and cried and laughed. Even after everyone had dispersed, she still stared blankly ahead, until the procession of thousands was no longer visible. I stood silently behind her and spoke softly. You raised Fukong well. He is well-read, courteous, and has a sense of duty to his country. When she learned she was to be married off, she did not cry or protest, but bowed her head 3 times in gratitude for the emperor's mercy. But the empress spoke in a hoarse voice. I wish she had not been raised so well by me. I wish she had resisted, refused, even disobeyed and defied authority. Do you know that she knelt in front of me that day and said that Fukong is a princess? So she must shoulder the responsibilities of a princess and live up to the expectations of the people? I suddenly spoke up. But a political marriage has never been the responsibility of a princess. It only proves the incompetence of our country. Upon hearing this, the empress suddenly turned her head to look at me, her eyes wide open. Empress, watch your words. I brushed the dust off my robe nonchalantly, a smile curving my lips. Zhao Mingzhu, you've spent your entire life being cautious with your words. What have you gained? When outsiders praise you as a virtuous empress, what else have you achieved? Your reputation for virtue couldn't even protect your own daughter. The empress fixed her gaze on me, but couldn't find the words to refute me. On the way back to the palace, Fuan gently took my hand. He used to be just a little kid who only came up to my waist. But when did he grow so tall? Almost as tall as me? The children are growing up day by day. And we are growing old day by day. The empress's health is getting worse and worse. The imperial physician said she likely wouldn't survive the winter. Perhaps because they had married young. The emperor still cherished the empress. He rarely showed such tenderness. He held her hand and asked if she had any final wishes. The empress paused for a moment. Your Majesty, I wish to see Fukan one last time. After Princess Fukan left, few people mentioned her name anymore. Because every time someone did, everyone would be reminded of the emperor's incompetence. The princess's marriage had never been a topic of praise. The emperor's expression grew cold. He snorted coldly. The empress is truly ill. How could she say such thoughtless words? With that, he swept his sleeve and left. The empress stood there alone, staring blankly, lost in thought. After a long while, she suddenly called out to me in a soft voice. Wen-Jin, do you think I really made a mistake? She didn't seem to expect an answer. Just speaking to herself. It was my mistake. It was my fault. The other concubines looked at each other, lowering their heads in confusion. I waved my hand and let them all leave. Then I walked over and held the empress's hand. You did nothing wrong. You raised Fukan well. She is worthy of the title of princess. But Wen-Jin, if it were you, if it had been Fukan who was married off that day, you wouldn't have let Fukan marry him, would you? Hearing this, I gripped her hand tightly. The composed expression I had been maintaining recently gave way to a hint of murderous intent. Even my voice was tinged with a ruthless edge. Even if it means killing the emperor and usurping the throne, I will not allow anyone to harm a single hair on my daughter's head. All right. All right. Cough cough. All right. The empress Sadius 3 times in a row, then pulled out a jade token from beside her pillow. These are the elite troops I have been raising. 3,000 elite soldiers. If it is possible, please, take my Fukan home. The empress's gaze swept past me and fixed on the distance. It was as if she was looking at someone. Then, her head tilted to one side, and she never woke up again. The empress passed away, and the whole country mourned. I knelt in front of the empress's spirit tablet for a day and a night. I remember when I first entered the palace. The empress was already the empress. She had always been like this, with a good reputation and a fondness for compromise. Whenever there was a conflict between the concubines and the palace, she would only persuade them to value harmony. That time, I had a fight with Xie Shiran and ended up in front of the empress. To be honest, I was the one who picked on Xie Shiran. The empress punished us both, but she was always lenient. Except for that time in the palace school. I taught the princes and princesses of the palace a lesson. The empress didn't punish me, but instead helped me settle things with the concubines who wanted to cause trouble. Later, she quietly praised me, saying I had taught them well. At that moment, the empress came alive, which was rare. It was only then that I realized that the empress was not just the empress. She was just trapped in the role of empress. Before becoming empress, she was just the pearl of the Zhao family. Every year, the emperor would organize a hunt. Those little kids had grown into tall, handsome young men. They were riding tall horses and looked incredibly handsome. Yugoeren was cracking sunflower seeds while pointing at the young man on the right riding a chestnut-colored horse. Look at our third son. How handsome he is. The third prince had grown up, shedding his baby fat, becoming taller and slimmer. He exuded an air of gentle elegance. That is, as long as he didn't speak. The third prince looked over this way and waved excitedly. Mother, wait for me to hunt a big game for you. The emperor rode in the middle, his gaze lingering on the princes. Suddenly, he asked the ministers behind him in a loud voice. My ministers, which of my sons do you think has the potential to surpass me? As soon as he spoke, everyone's expressions changed. The current emperor had not yet chosen an heir, and this question seemed to imply that he was considering doing so. The ministers had various thoughts, and the princes were all harboring their own agendas. Father, you are in the prime of your life, and your sons are still far from your level. The eldest prince spoke, and the others followed suit. The emperor laughed and said nothing more. He simply scanned the crowd with a calm expression. After a long time, he laughed loudly. Then let me see which of my princes is the most outstanding. The winner of this autumn hunt will be crowned crown prince. When he finished speaking, everyone's expressions changed, and several ministers looked at each other. Since ancient times, that position had been the object of everyone's competition, but no one expected that the winner would be Fuan. The young girl had long since blossomed into a graceful young lady. Her eyebrows and eyes were somewhat similar to Xie Shiran, but she was not as gentle as her, instead having a touch more rebelliousness. In the autumn hunt, none of my princes could compare to you, little girl. Fuan raised her eyebrows and smiled freely. Your Majesty, I am not talented, but I have not disgraced you. Fu An's words were clever, and the emperor's expression visibly relaxed. Very well. Since that is the case, I must reward you properly. How about granting you a suitable husband? I think the son of Li Shilang is quite suitable. Fu An remained expressionless, bowing deeply. Your humble son thanks the emperor. On the way back, Yu Guiran frowned the entire time. Once they were alone, she sighed resentfully. You shouldn't have let Fu An steal the spotlight like that. I understood her meaning. The emperor had begun to fear Fu An. I raised my eyebrows, unconcerned. My Fu An is a phoenix soaring through the heavens. Nothing in this world can hide her brilliance. Yes, your Fu An is the best. But I heard that the son of Minister Li is a consumptive. The emperor is eliminating all potential threats. It shows that he is afraid. He is afraid of my Fu An. How ridiculous. The mighty emperor is afraid of a little girl. The noble lady Yu turned her head away and ignored me. She left me alone to laugh. I was truly happy. After all, she was the rose I had raised with my own hands, and my eyes were filled with pride. Fu An, of course, was unhappy about the marriage to the Li family. But she said nothing, content to sew her wedding gown, as if she had truly accepted her fate. But I knew that my Fu An had always been a girl with her own mind. Does Lady Wan not feel curious? Fu An blinked her eyes and asked me. It was like we were back when we were children, when she would hug my arm and ask me, does Lady Wan not wonder what Fu An has prepared for your birthday gift? I remember I would always smile and stroke her head and say, all I need to know is that Fu An has never disappointed me. The emperor seemed in a hurry. He ordered the Imperial Astronomical Bureau to set Fu An's wedding date for the 8th day of this month. When Fu An heard the news, she merely frowned and then sighed regretfully. I haven't finished embroidering the wedding gown yet. But it doesn't matter. The emperor has been coming to my palace much more frequently. I find him annoying, but I have no choice but to deal with him. I can't help but give him a cold shoulder. When one does too many dishonest things, one tends to become suspicious of everything. Just like 10 years ago, when he suspected the Xie family of harboring troops to rebel, he plotted to frame them and had the entire family executed. Fearing that Xie Shiran, his own concubine, would seek revenge, he simply poisoned her with a cup of poison. And after Fu Kong was married off, Seeing that the empress was growing distant, he secretly had someone poison her. Even, he feared the power of my family, the Wen family, and had my children killed after I entered the palace. The eunuch who takes care of the emperor has been saying that the emperor has been eating vegetarian food and worshipping Buddha lately, and his temper has become much milder. People, when they do too many bad things, they always put their hopes in gods and Buddhas. But how could gods and Buddhas protect someone like him? The day of Fuan's wedding was a beautiful sunny day, with a rare clear sky. I looked up at the sky and suddenly felt the sunlight was very bright. The noble lady, you laughed at me for crying. I argued that the sun was too bright. Killing the emperor and usurping the throne are acts of violence. How could we women in the palace dare to do such things? Zhao Mingzhu, you really have overestimated me. It seems I can only watch helplessly as my daughter is being arranged step by step toward her predetermined fate. But the ending of the story is a bit different. The emperor's health is deteriorating. The voices calling for Chu to be installed are growing louder in the court. But people, the more they care about something, the tighter they hold on to it. The emperor was reluctant to appoint Chu, and even held military power tightly in his own hands. He didn't trust any of his sons. To everyone's surprise, the emperor gave military power to Fuan. It turned out that this was what Fuan wanted. A married princess. A status that posed no threat to the emperor. This way, she could get what she wanted without any reservations. How could the arrogant emperor believe that a married princess could stir up any trouble? When the Xiongnu invaded again, Fuan was appointed commander-in-chief. Everyone thought the emperor had lost his mind. But I knew he was just looking for an excuse to control Fuan. A princess who had spent her entire life in the palace, living in luxury, would probably be terrified on the battlefield. But he didn't know. Fuan had trained in martial arts since childhood. By the age of 12, she could wield a red-plumed spear with supernatural skill. The Xiongnu were driven back in retreat. When the news reached the capital, the emperor was so overjoyed he fainted. The imperial physician diagnosed it as overexertion. The emperor convalesced in bed for some time before reluctantly naming the eldest prince as heir apparent. The eldest prince was the eldest son of the empress. He was born in the legitimate Eastern palace, so it was considered proper and justified. The court officials had no objections. The storybooks always say that eunuchs hold immense power, second only to the emperor. Today, I have seen it with my own eyes. The emperor didn't say a word. But as soon as Dihai the eunuch moved his lips, the crown prince was appointed. By all accounts, Dihai the eunuch was an old servant of the emperor. There was no reason for him to betray his master. But when he was still a young eunuch and couldn't even eat his fill, it was Xie Shiran who gave him a box of pastries. It was also Xie Shiran who paid for him to send his mother home for burial. I always said that Xie Shiran was a good person who didn't get her just reward. At this moment, I finally agreed with her. Those good deeds done without thinking will always come back to you. The emperor's illness was strange, but no one dared to say anything. The emperor's illness came on suddenly, but no one dared to say anything. After all, he was not well liked by his ministers. He had no talent and was always suspicious of everyone. Every time he went to court, it was like he was putting his head in the noose. Everyone decided to turn a blind eye and let the crown prince rule in his stead. On the day Fuan returned to the capital, it was the 7th day after His Majesty's death. She calmly lit an incense stick for the late emperor. Behind her was a woman dressed in plain clothes. She was thin and had a gentle face. Before I could say anything, the noble lady started crying. She cried even louder than she did on the day of the late emperor's funeral. That person was none other than Fu Kong. It was Fu Kong, who had been sent in a political marriage 5 years ago. Fu Kong knelt before me, bowing her head respectfully. I simply held her slender arms, repeating, "As long as you're back, as long as you're safe, Zhao Mingzhu." I kept my promise to you. I did it. Please don't haunt me in my dreams anymore. After the eldest prince ascended the throne, he indeed implemented benevolent policies, even allowing women to hold official positions. Fuan and I both understood his meaning. He was showing us through his actions that he didn't mind. The empress really knew how to raise children. Both of her children resembled her greatly. But Fuan still refused. Your Majesty, my heart does not lie in the court. Now, I only wish to take my mother empress with me to see the vast world beyond these palace walls. My Fuan, her heart lies in the heavens. When we came out of the hall of cultivating the heart, I asked Fuan, what should we do about that consumptive bastard from the Li family? When Fuan heard his name, his face suddenly turned red. Then he stammered, he's just a man. He doesn't eat much. So let's just keep him around for now. After all, he's not bad looking. I felt very sad when I heard this, feeling that my daughter, whom I had raised with such difficulty, was falling in love. I listened as Fuan continued, when we have a better looking one, we'll replace him. I listened as Fuan continued, when we find someone better looking, we'll replace him. On the day we left the palace, I deliberately wore a bright red outfit to show off in front of Xie Shiran's memorial tablet. Xie Shiran, are you regretting it now? Leaving Fuan to me like that, so you can have a life of leisure? Xie Shiran, I hate you the most. You're always so fake and pretentious, pretending to be kind to everyone. Why are you so nice to everyone? Xie Shiran, I hate you the most. When Fuan came in, she saw me hugging Xie Shiran's spirit tablet and crying so hard I couldn't speak. She suddenly remembered what her mother had said before she died. Go find Lady Wan. She was my mother's best friend. She's always been sharp-tongued but soft-hearted. Just cry a little and she'll soften up. If you really can't cry, just pretend. Lady Wan is stupid. She won't be able to tell. The begonia is in full bloom outside the window. It's a beautiful season. Lady Wan, wipe your tears. It's time to go. The end.